like, I don't know what evolutionary function just randomly catching on fire would actually serve us, you know.
What about that particular century? Do you see the spike and then it comes back down or whatever? Like
excessive alcohol consumption, you know, like alcoholics and stuff.
We're not talking beer or wine or anything like that.
No.
You got to be getting into the, 100 plus proof range, 150 really, before it really gets flammable.
The trinity of components, you know, you've got fuel, you've got heat, you've got oxygen, basically. Where you're just walking down the street and boom, you're on fire.
I kind of wonder, would you have to be dead? Like,
I don't think it makes it not creepy. Like, it is still kind of petrifying to be consumed by fire while you're passed out drunk or dead. Welcome to yet another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we would totally love it if you would like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. That's what spooky people do.
Yeah, and I'm not very spooky right now, but that's okay. I listened to Typo Negative's October Rust, so I'm in the spirit. And so I am Casey of Rochefort, and we would love it if you would, of course, check out our music at the end of the show, because we write our own music, and there's always a new song that you've never heard, unless you're a super fan, of course. And super fans, well, they go to patreon.com/KSMvidcast and be loyal deep sink divers, where they can get our music all they want. Or, if you're into Spotify or iTunes, that's your bag. Just head on over there. So, Eric, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, I thought we would talk about... Oh, God! Woo! Spontaneous human combustion. And other such crazy spooky topics too, because that's always been something that's been I've been fascinated with it.
Now tell the truth, is that the first time you've ever had it burn when you pee?
No. But that's for another episode. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it. So for those that have been living under a rock for the last half century or whatever, actually this goes way back. Yeah, this is very old. Spontaneous human combustion essentially is some sort of phenomena where a person will, well, as the name suggests, spontaneously catch fire and burn, right? Like, they just start burning and the fire consumes them. And typically in these stories, only the person is burned. Maybe their hands and feet are left behind or something, but even other adjacent flammable materials are not consumed in the flame. It's just the person.
Yeah, like their immediate surroundings are just fine. And Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, aren't there like some hoity-toity prats that like the sound like they're not woo, and they call it like auto-immolation or something?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that term to me would mean something like, you decided to set yourself on fire.
Yeah.
Like those what Tibetan monks or whatever that out of protest set themselves on fire. Yeah, this is not the same thing. Um, but that's an interesting topic, but definitely not really like a Halloween themed kind of thing.
I don't like what you're doing. I'm gonna set myself on fire. Okay.
I guess that's kind of the ultimate form of protest. Like, I'm gonna burn myself. Dang, some people just burn flags.
Jeez. Yeah. So the whole idea of just randomly catching on fire in nature is of course a thing, but we know what causes that a lot of times. Whether it's the sun or lightning, fire will just appear or something. But when it happens in a body, that's where it gets weird. And
Well, there's those beetles that can like throw out, what is it, pyrophoric materials or something that create fire.
By pulsing the jet 500 times a second, it keeps its rear end just cool enough to prevent it being cooked.
So that's maybe, I mean, it's not like unheard of in nature, but it is a little bit weird.
I would venture to guess that there's probably some kind of chemical combination that they're throwing out that kind of like a two-part weld or something like that, or
Yeah, it is. It's definitely like a special cocktail of chemicals.
yeah.
And yeah, I don't know that humans are really like, I don't know what evolutionary function just randomly catching on fire would actually serve us. Those kind of biological systems, like what mechanism, I mean, maybe, who knows? There's some like strange effects of antiquated or deprecated systems that might possibly be at play here. Who knows?
So what I know of it is that it was been around since like the 17th century or something.
Yeah.
As far as like observation goes. But it was like really popular in the 18th century, and it still occurs, but it's like I start thinking, what about that particular century do you see this spike and then it comes back down or whatever? Like,
Yeah, that is a little bit weird. Well, one of the things that seems to be common among most of these kinds of cases are things like excessive alcohol consumption, like
yeah.
alcoholics and stuff. But that drinking alcohol might be some kind of precursor to this. And maybe there's a component of anti-alcohol consumption societal stuff at work there, perpetuating this idea that, oh, drink too much alcohol and you're going to catch on fire or something like that.
There's a few things I see wrong with that. One being, unless it was some pretty concentrated alcohol, like we're not talking beer or wine or anything like that.
No.
You got to be getting into the 100 plus proof range, 150 really, before it really gets flammable. And while those flames do kind of burn on the low end and they burn out quickly and tend to leave their surroundings unscathed, other problems are presented in the fact that, what do you need for fire? Right?
Well, there's the classic components, the trinity of components. You've got fuel, you've got heat, you've got oxygen, basically.
Exactly. And how much free roaming oxygen do you think there is within the tightly packed confines of your body where these flames are supposed to be emerging from.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing: like having been somebody who's looked into this extensively, um, there are very few cases of people truly spontaneously combusting, like out of nowhere. You're just walking down the street and boom, you're on fire. Like that rarely happens. Usually, it's like somebody they discover the remains of somebody after the fact, and in a lot of those cases, most of those cases, there has been some kind of form of ignition nearby, like somebody has a cigarette or something like that. That's actually very common, that people are alcoholic, they're smoking cigarettes, they pass out, and the cigarette ignites something adjacent to them, and then something catches fire, and that's where all this begins. And there's an effect, I think it's called wicking, where essentially the idea is the fats in your body melt and are drawn up into the burning material, like your clothing or something like that, and just burn gently as it slowly pulls the fat and stuff out of your body and burns until you're dead. Because, well, I guess you passed out drunk or something like that. It's still like really creepy to think about. Like that could totally happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, if the pyroclastic or ignition point or whatever that is, that if that can be found to be external, then yeah, I don't see anything necessarily creepy or weird about this. But in many cases, they don't find a cause, or I'll say this: they probably didn't have very sophisticated forensics back when it was really popular or whatever. So maybe that could account for the reduction in things that we've called spontaneous human combustion, right?
Yeah. My point is, like, in most of the cases, there's some kind of external source of heat. And I don't think it makes it not creepy. Like, it is still kind of petrifying to be consumed by fire while you're passed out drunk or dead or something like that. That's still like kind of weird.
I kind of wonder, would you have to be dead? Like, how? Here's the thing, though. Like, I've been pretty drunk, and I've even gotten to the point of like kind of losing consciousness or whatever, and it was hard to wake me up, but I wasn't unwakeable. And if you lit me on fire, I'd like to say that I would be pretty alert all of a sudden.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of these people had died by some means, and then were consumed by fire. But like you said, back then we didn't really have the technological means to determine the cause of death and exactly when and how it happened and stuff. So it's all speculative, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm spacing out thinking about organic chemistry right now.
Well, so
Kind of
okay,
rare.
there are like a few seemingly plausible explanations of how this could happen without an external source. Things I've heard is, I mean, I'm no biologist, so mast cell activation syndrome is one,
What?
or an overproduction of diphosphine in your body, which could cause a pyrophoric reaction where things are ignited internally. Because, okay, so there are a select few accounts of somebody literally spontaneously combusting. Just you're standing there having a conversation and a fire just comes out of their gut. And they're consumed by fire. So
I don't see how that could happen, though.
Huh?
I just don't know how that could actually happen. Like a fire, initiating inside of flesh, or like even the cavity of your gut, let's say, like somewhere where there might be enough air to like give it a spark. Like,
well, the idea is
through you without you being like and like making a scene, but you just like burst it like explosively into fire, like
no, it's a small
with a fireball or something.
Yeah, Hadouken. No, it's usually like a small fire that begins and then grows. I mean, my memory is a little sketchy on all this because it's been decades. But I think the thing like with diphosphane is the idea that it interacts with methane in your gut and creates some kind of energetic reaction that eventually creates fire. And if there's just enough oxygen, because there is a little bit, you swallow air all the time, so there might possibly, let's just say, like random 1 in a million chances that you just have the right perfect storm cocktail of chemistry in your gut, and it ignites, and it is just enough to burst through. Well, now that there's a hole, there's enough space for actual combustion to take place. And from that point, the whole wicking thing, like that, I think is a lot more plausible.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because that there's precedent behind that. I mean, I don't know what the melting point of human fat is off the top of my head, but I don't think necessarily that high. But
I just can't imagine that like, I'm just putting myself in that person's shoes, right? A small flame like busts out of my chest or my stomach or something, and you just stand there and get burned. I'd be rolling on the ground, like slapping it, like, oh my God, I'm on fire. There'd be people like coming over with cups of water trying to extinguish it. Like, I don't see how that ends in death. I mean, maybe hundreds of years ago, I guess. I don't know. We didn't have like water taps you could just conveniently take out like a gallon of water from. So maybe that explains that thing. But it is weird that there's a very narrow window from like the 1700s to the 1800s that where this is very, very prevalent.
Yeah, that is pretty strange. Yeah, I struggle with the science of it. But I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff that we have yet to fully explain with science, and this could easily be one of them. Like, there's lots of rare things that we just take for granted that they're actual things, even though we may never see them in person in our lifetime. Right?
Well, yeah, like things like ball lightning or something, which we know is legit real, but is so rare that there's very few videos. There's accounts of it from the past, but nowadays there's only like a handful of videos of it. So maybe this is one of those things that's just like so unlikely that it's a 1 in a million kind of thing. Like every once in a while, somebody will just catch fire for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. I guess it could be a thing. I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. Like I don't know for sure, but I mean,
like
there's
highly implausible, I would say.
Yeah.
Even with like, so I mean, I've heard the theory that it's because I think they abandoned this like centuries ago, by the way, but people would think, oh, they were such a drunkard that they were just saturated with alcohol to the point where it would combust or whatever. But it's like, well, first off, by the time you've drank that much alcohol, it's begun to metabolize. It's not really like hyper flammable anymore.
Well, and the point where you would die from alcohol poisoning is so low that there's like you couldn't light it on fire if you wanted to.
Yeah.
If you had a blowtorch, you'd be working at that shit for a long time. So I don't know that really comes into play from a chemistry standpoint. Maybe from the standpoint of like knocking you out so you'll succumb to this kind of thing, possibly.
Right.
And maybe there's a little bit of propaganda at work too, like anti-alcohol people trying to perpetuate this idea that, you know, if you drink too much, you're going to catch on fire, which I could totally see. Like Occam's razor, like to me, that seems the most likely outcome or possibility that it's just like a bunch of people trying to scare people.
Yeah. My palms still haven't grown any hair. And,
nor have mine.
and neither is my head. So
well, clearly you're just rubbing the wrong head.
I'm wasting my time.
Double Polaroid. Oh man. Oh yeah. I think that's a really fascinating thing because I do believe that it's highly unlikely, but I think some of these situations, like having looked into it, there's enough evidence to support the idea that it actually does happen sometimes, like every once in a while, something like this happens. And it's like just absolutely the right set of circumstances. I mean, we have like millions of people with quadrillions of possible situational configurations. Like, I guess anything could happen. But it's become a thing, like, you know, spontaneous human combustion, like people can catch fire. And yeah.
What do you think of, like, when I had this thought, I had this weird deja vu moment. Like, I feel like I've witnessed somebody commit suicide by setting themselves on fire.
Whoa.
But it could have been in a movie. But anyway, what I was thinking was, do you think that maybe these were just instances of somebody using that as a method to kill themselves?
I think it's possible. I guess it's kind of, I'm on the fence in that regard. Like, I think there's enough evidence to support the plausibility of something like that potentially happening, like very, very rarely.
Well, here's what we didn't talk about, though, is the lack of damage to their surroundings, though, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, I don't know if there's some complex explanation that's been offered where, oh, look, in certain circumstances, you can have a regular thing not be fire damaged or something. You know, maybe something like that exists. But my idea here about the suicide thing is you're probably not going to just sit there and burn, right? Even if you wanted to die that way, you would be like moving around in pain and stuff, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Fire hurts a lot.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. After a while of burning, I think your nerve endings go dead. So you're certainly not comfortable by any means, but I think you're used to it to the point where if you were not desperately trying to save your own life and snuff it out and look for water or whatever, you might be capable of standing in the middle of a room or even on your balcony and just burning and burning and burning and not like leaving a trace around you. And then as the fire like settles and you're about to die, you walk over to your chair and just sit down and you're like, yeah.
Well, that's a pretty wild theory. I mean, I guess there are people who get off on pain. So maybe like if you're going to go out, you might as well go out with a bang. I think like as far as the surroundings not being burning, the wicking theory really makes a lot of sense, that fats in your body are drawn up and they're burned and slowly you're consumed, and chances are you're probably already dead. right? Like I highly doubt people are in any way conscious, meaning still alive, and somehow being burned alive and just don't wake up. I think it's something that happens after you die. But yeah, who knows? The stories are endless. There's quite a few in this regard, and they're rather interesting.
Well, if any of our viewers have spontaneously caught on fire and died,
go ahead and leave a comment posthumously. Hey, by the way, YouTube allows that now. Oh man! Keeping with like the whole spooky topics thing. Like I want to go into other realms and stuff like that. Because I don't know that we can like spend
Outer Limits.
Yeah. Oh, such a good show. Holy crap! That one with the spaceship that was sentient. Oh, if I remember in post, I'll throw that episode name in there. It's my favorite thing. Well, it was the new Outer Limits. Okay, so it was the '90s version.
It's probably an even newer one now.
Yeah,
I remember that one though. Yeah,
that was so good. They were spaceships built for war, and then the war ended, and they just kind of drifted through space, like cultivating humans to do their bidding and keep them maintained and stuff. Oh, it was so crazy and cool.
I think the new version of all like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits is Black Mirror.
Oh, yep, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if anyone's ever really drawn a line there, but I mean, it's the same basic idea. Is always a different scenario in each episode, and
yeah, and kind of like making you question reality and things that you believe, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's keep going. Like spooky stuff. What do you think? Do you think any of these things exist? Bigfoot, werewolves, aliens, vampires, or ghosts?
Oh man, that's. Oof.
I mean, just like pick one. I have it written down so we can come back and reference it.
Okay, so I want to say yes to some of these. I mean, we've done an episode on ghosts and we've done an episode on aliens, and I think we've really fleshed out, you know, what we think is possible, impossible, what's going on, what's not going on. But,
Yeah.
I've always, I mean, you could make the argument, right, that like vampires and werewolves probably had some relatively boring biological oddity sort of origin to the story, and it just morphed over time into this tale of you know, a wolf that turns into a bipedal man wolf thing and chases you when it's really just like an animal that got a fur coat for the winter and looked really different or something, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there any one particular one of those sorts of monsters or whatever that you think are real?
I would like go into like the cryptozoology kind of aspect and say that Bigfoot is the most plausible. I mean, apart from aliens, like there's something there, but we've already kind of touched on that. But I think Bigfoot is a possibility. Could there be in this giant planet something that's very uncommon that we rarely see, like a sentient bipedal humanoid creature? Well, probably. I mean, especially if it's smart. I could avoid detection for my entire life if I wanted to. So something like that, maybe.
I do want to agree with that. There's just a couple of things that I'm wondering, like, so out in Siberia, for sure, like you could probably see like a vastly different evolved, species that we probably had a common ancestor with not too long ago.
Mhm. Yeah.
But like around Washington, for instance, granted, maybe sightings have gone down as we've grown and populated and gentrified and all that shit, but yeah, what I'm trying to get at is like, it seems like you would, in a place like this, or your area, I guess I'm in Memphis, in a place like Washington, there would be, I don't know, just like too much human infestation, let's say, to have them like not be basically discovered by this point. That's
there are some fairly vast national forests in this state, in Washington State. So it's possible that something that wants to remain hidden could actually do that if there were very few of them. Maybe I don't know. And the stories that go back for centuries about these beings that I don't know. I want to believe, like, I think something like that is entirely possible. My dad claims he saw the Sasquatch once.
Yeah. No, the one I know is actually a thing is the chupacabra.
Shit.
When I lived in Seattle, I drove past it every day. It's a Mexican restaurant right there on 45th and well.
Well, that's an entirely different animal. Yeah.
Oh. No, yeah, Bigfoot's interesting. When I was a kid, we'd go out to the family lake place and take walks at midnight out in the woods. And every now and then you'd hear or see something out of the corner of your eye. As a kid, I always just hoped it was Bigfoot, but more likely is that it was a bear or something.
Yeah, a bear or a cougar or something like that. And maybe there are more normal explanations for these things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that because those kinds of things exist, those kinds of explanations, that something like Bigfoot doesn't exist. The world is a big place. We really haven't mapped every corner of every location. We haven't. You're talking about the ocean. There's like so much we haven't seen. So the idea of like sea monsters and stuff like that, I'm like, well, maybe. Just like anything else, I think I'm skeptical, but I'm open-minded, right? Like, it's possible that these things might exist, but you have to be cautious, especially when somebody's trying to sell you something.
Yeah, but you're wrong though. The world isn't big. The world is a vampire
set to drain me. Yeah, and we all know the world is flat too, so it's a lot smaller than we're told.
Vampires, though, that's an interesting one actually, because I also think that's probably something that was blown out of proportion, and of course, like the whole vampire myth can be traced to like ripping off there was like a Japanese I think it was a Japanese myth of a guy with his head like cut off this way and it had water in it, and he had to like walk around without spilling any of the water, and he would like feed on people at night, like suck their blood.
I feel like that's kind of like folklore, like there's some kind of folk tale, like a message, some kind of lesson there, and those things are valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I, yeah, again, like I want to believe these things, like, and I've seen some stuff, especially ghosts and aliens. Um, so I have an open mind, but I think there's maybe a little bit more grounded explanation for a lot of these things, and like especially stuff in the past. Like we know a lot more now than our ancestors did.
Here's,
So,
here's an interesting thought. It's pretty flimsy logic, but
hmm.
I just started thinking, like, you hear a lot about alien sightings. You hear a lot about ghost sightings. You don't hear a lot of vampire sightings, right? Or
Yeah.
werewolf sightings. And these are things that are we consider just as make believe. But what if the fact that you have so many of one particular one lends credence to the idea that maybe that's because it actually does exist?
Ooh, man. Yeah, and
If you
I would argue that it exists.
supposedly don't exist, right?
Yeah. Well, I think some of these things may exist in some form. It's just our interpretation of them that makes them ethereal or kind of woo or something. Maybe Bigfoot or aliens or ghosts are like, or vampires are like totally legit thing. Oh, sorry, werewolves. I didn't mean to leave you out. Um, but maybe they're legit things in a certain way. And it's merely our fantastical imagination that lends them some kind of special status or something like that. Maybe there's a perfectly simple explanation for these things. Like they could be real, but maybe they're not like metaphysical like a lot of people claim.
Huh.
Some kind of genetic aberration or weird shit like that. Like somebody's all messed up, and the whole Quasimodo thing or something. Like maybe he's just a regular guy that had some kind of like just roll of the dice, like bad genes.
Right,
And
yeah.
you know
I just started having this thought. What if there was like ancient man that just had this genetic predisposition for growing hair all over its body, right? I've actually heard of this being a thing. So what if that's been happening enough throughout history that it just became like a moray ingrained into us to cast that person out, right? And then over time they build this kind of myth of that being like this shadowy mystic figure or whatever that maybe isn't even real, but like subconsciously when somebody has like their freak hairy kid or something, they go set it out in the forest as like some primal urge or something, and we just don't even realize that we've created Bigfoot. And then maybe before it was even known as Bigfoot, maybe Bigfoot is the lore that morphed into werewolves.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, I have an idea that you actually inspired me to think about, which I'll bring up in a minute. It's very related. That's a good point. And people are like they talk about the behavior of these things, like werewolves or something, like howling at the moon, full moon, and they come out and get all crazy and kill people and stuff. And it's like, you know what? If you were shunned by society, would you be totally sane? I don't think anybody would. You would be nuts, and you do stupid stuff too. So, I mean, yeah, like aliens aside, all these things could possibly be explained by, well, maybe aliens too, but by like everyday genetic aberrations, I guess.
Huh. So,
Yeah.
huh. Yeah, maybe the whole idea of monsters is really just bad genes.
And it could be, especially because a lot of these stories go way, way back, right? Before we understood genetics. I mean, we're still dealing with like the miasma theory of germs back then. Um, so it's possible that a lot of these things were just people who just didn't come out right. Like, and we didn't have cameras back then, so we can't take pictures and stuff like that. We didn't know what was going on, so we're just like, well, it's a monster, obviously. When it maybe is just like a regular person who was a little bit twisted genetically, and might be the genesis of some of these things.
Yeah.
Except for Bigfoot, like Bigfoot's kind of special. I mean, that's the PNW in me talking, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing about Sasquatch being, I don't know. I always come back to the lack of evidence and stuff. But, like,
Yeah, and that video that everybody talks to, yeah, that was completely faked, by the way.
This one where
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that one. Totally fake. Now, it's not to discount people's firsthand accounts where they might have seen something. I don't think my dad's definitely not like a crazy guy, not prone to imagination or anything like that.
genetic, hairy tree walker man.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I think these things are possible, but maybe they're not as wild as we think. And they could be people. They could be some kind of throwback to some sort of branch in our gene pool from a long time ago that's been hidden for centuries or millennia. I don't know. But it's fun to think about.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think like unless you're talking about crop circles, which is completely fake, by the way. Maybe don't make fun of people who think these things, or I don't know, because it's possible, ever so slightly. Like maybe not 100% likely, but even a 1% chance is quite a bit in that regard.
So what do you think about zombies?
Ooh, I think zombies actually have like a real world origin, from some kind of brain dysfunction, a disease that people get that causes them to act weird. I mean, remember, hundreds of years ago, we didn't know what was going on. So if people are acting weird, we think they're possessed. There wasn't that long ago where we would bring in a priest to exorcise the demons in somebody because they had some kind of mental disorder.
Doesn't that still go on?
Well, yeah, sadly.
Yeah.
So, but maybe that's where all this stuff comes from.
But what would tie it to the idea of them being dead, like with rotting flesh and all that stuff?
Ooh. I mean, maybe it's just people's imagination run amok.
Well, I guess it could be something like syphilis, where it can affect people physically and mentally.
Yeah, that's true. And going back, like people didn't understand these things that much.
Or lepers too.
Leprosy totally could be the origin of that. Maybe Ebola existed long, long ago. Who knows?
Huh.
Yeah.
Zombies.
Huh. Oh man, I'm just thinking about that song "Zombie" by
Cranberries.
Cranberries. Yeah, love that song. Oh man, that's so good.
Sad that
Um,
she died.
yeah, I know. Well, committed suicide actually.
Wait, she did?
I think so.
Oh,
There could be too much beer, but I think that was the case.
I mean, I actually I don't know if I ever heard the cause come out because they usually don't always say that right off the bat.
I think that is the case, but I
Oh,
could be wrong.
damn.
Man. But imagine if she came back as an undead zombie and started performing. Like, how badass would that be?
That would be pretty awesome.
Oh, man. Like, so speaking about like weird, strange things,
Oh wait, I just
I,
have to say in tribute to the Cranberries, I think that the coolest song they ever did was "Promises."
oh, yeah. Yeah. They had some good music. That like, if I'm right and she committed suicide, that is like, God, there was so much good stuff there. Like, why? Ugh.
Yeah, but let's get back to scary, not sad.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, okay. Here's a creepy thing. In the '90s, there's this tale of terror, um, where this old lady in Russia found this weird disfigured baby like screaming in the snow and adopted her. I think it was a her, if I remember correctly. Well, the name is probably her. She named her Alashenka, and apparently this baby could only eat like raw meat. And this woman like raised the baby, and everybody was terrified of this thing. Like, I'm telling you, look up Alashenka and that story. Like, if you do not want to sleep uh, tonight, that's the story you should look up.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and just thinking about like weird, crazy things that could be like some kind of, I don't know, crack babies or something like that. They're just like stuff that came out wrong because of chemistry or genetics.
What
And maybe
about
it's
what do you think of the origin of a doll coming to life?
ooh, oh man, what was that movie?
Been a ton of them now.
No, there was one in the '80s.
Ducky?
No, Mannequin. Yeah,
Huh.
where a guy like falls in love with a mannequin, and the mannequin was like alive in his
Oh,
presence or something like that. Yeah,
uh, huh.
I'm frankly quite fearful of that actually being the case. There's something about that really like digs into the deepest, darkest depths of your soul.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting to see what scares somebody.
yeah,
Like some people are really creeped out by that, or maybe by clowns, or like things that like not everybody would necessarily be the most creeped out by. Some people are really, really creeped out by it. That's
yeah, that is interesting. Like, I mean, I say it creeps me out, but it creeps me out in a certain way that I can deal with. But the things that I can't deal with are, well, in particular, high voltage. I have nightmares. I have had for the last maybe 30 years, I have had nightmares about high voltage power lines, like uh, electrocuting me. I've like woken up in a cold sweat after having a nightmare about being electrocuted. I've had like dreams about like power lines crisscrossing in my path and stuff. I've had some beautiful dreams too regarding that. but most of them are very dark. And that's the thing that scares me. Like, I have nightmares about stuff degrading and like just coming apart in my hands and stuff like that. Um, you there's a lot of dreams that involve houses that are dilapidated and kind of like the wood is just turning to mush. And you know, somehow I have to hold it all together. And yeah, like I have some weird dreams. Like the power lines though are a constant theme.
I recently had a Facebook memory where I typed about a dream I had just had where I was representing my dojo in a martial arts match, and somebody kicked out my eye tooth and it landed in my palm and it turned into an actual eye. And
Whoa.
then I ate it.
Wow, that is weird.
Yeah.
And to think, like dreams, you know, there's people who believe that dreams are some kind of window into some kind of paranormal parallel universe or something, right? I'm lean a little bit more towards the side of it's sort of your brain just working out all the weird shit that it can't sort out, in a very creative way. And but to think how strange our dreams are. You know, why do I have nightmares that involve power lines, like million-volt power lines and huge pylons in the misty distance and stuff like that? It's like crazy. Yeah.
What if all these things are real, but they're only in our dreams? But they're beings that exist in your dreams.
Mm.
In the fabric of your mind.
Well, now you're getting into the whole territory of the simulation. You know, how do you differentiate between reality and fantasy? The stuff that you imagine and reality. Like, is there a true test? Well, because I feel like this particular topic that I am bringing up right now should be its own episode.
Yeah.
But how do you prove that you're real? Like that you're alive, that this is the real world? I don't know. There is actually a proof for that. Like, how?
If you can't find a serial number on it, it's probably real. If you look under his elbow and he's got a serial number on there, or like, you know, like the year he was constructed and a trademark, and patent pending number, that's how you know it's not real.
Speaking of that, like, I there are patents on living organisms. Just, I think we've gone pretty deep here, but I just want to talk about this real quick. Like the idea that you could patent a living thing, like a strain of DNA could be patented and could be property of some company or a government, right? Like, what? How? It's a natural process.
Okay, so can they only do that with a genetic sequence that would not occur in nature?
I think it's genetically modified organisms. So GMOs could potentially have a patent behind them. But it does kind of beg the question, like, you know, this could happen randomly by natural processes. So how can you possibly patent something that is essentially natural? Like, whoa.
I would have to say that it would involve utilizing a method to do it that you can patent.
Yeah,
right?
that is actually, patents tend to revolve around that, especially these kinds of things.
So actually, when you think of it that way, like there's actually nothing wrong with it because I mean, this isn't something that just everyone can do, right? Like you had to develop a way to do this, and
Yeah, and it probably cost a lot of money and took like years of R&D.
oh yeah,
I'll give people that. But then, you get things like patented seeds, and somehow the seed spawn of a plant like blows into a farmer's field and sprouts. And now all of a sudden they're the subject of litigation. Like, I think that's bullshit. Like, your plant just came into my territory randomly. Like,
I've I don't know if I've heard this or if this is just something that I thought is the way it should be, but I mean, if they want to make money by selling their, modified seed or whatever, um, you'd think they would build it in that it only lasts like maybe one generation or something, or like the fertility of it is limited to the fact where you'd have to keep buying seeds or something. You couldn't just
well,
replant.
yeah. And like Monsanto is known for that. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't want it to spawn any kind of seeds.
Yeah,
That would be detrimental to your business model, I guess.
yeah,
But still, the idea that you could like, patent a genetic strain is a little bit weird. And what it is, going back to like the werewolves and zombies and stuff, like what if you created a zombie gene? Could you patent it?
yeah. Well, probably, but yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I mean, does a patent have to be? I'm thinking for like a loophole situation here. Does a patent have to be a certain percent unique, like your idea or whatever? And where I'm going with that is like um, DNA itself isn't something that you're constructing from the ground up. Like you're taking something that already exists in nature and doing like a little bit to it to make it
Yeah.
slightly different. So I guess I'm trying to argue is like how much of this is really just like slightly tweaked nature and how much of it is really like an actual invention that you can patent.
Well, and I think what you said earlier, the idea that patents revolve around processes, is a lot more valid.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, maybe I wouldn't put it past people to try to patent just a specific genetic strain. But yeah, if you have a process, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you spent
Like
probably
Chris
millions of dollars, like
oh yeah.
countless hours trying to develop something, and you should reap the rewards of your efforts.
Yeah, hundreds of
Um,
millions.
yeah,
But
but just simply some strand of DNA, like, I don't know about that.
yeah. I mean, I get it, and I also see how it's crappy, but
Yeah, same here.
patents are yeah.
Yeah, they need to be much more limited. Same thing with copyright. Thank you, fucking Disney. Yeah. Don't get me started on Disney and copyright. Oh, God.
We need to do a Disney episode.
Oh, man. What is it, like 80 years now? You got to be kidding me. But this has gone like a little bit less creepy and more into like legal and stuff. I mean, maybe it's creepy. It could be creepy to some, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good point to end on.
Yeah. Yeah, we started on people setting on fire accidentally, and
ended up on patents and copyrights and laws and stuff like that. I mean, but that's how we do things.
how the hell do we get these places?
Oh man.
We already
Yeah.
played in our mind.
Australian for never mind.
It tastes like it's got butter inside.
Oh god.
You remember those commercials?
Oh yeah.
Toaster biscuits. Oh, those things were so good.
Oh man, those were hella good.
Man, I miss those.
Oh man.
They really did taste like you had butter in your mouth.
Yeah. Oh man, I wonder if I can find like an advertisement for that and throw it in. Oh,
Yeah,
toaster biscuits.
Those were great commercials.
Yeah.
They're great.
Oh man. Yeah, this is a very meandering but very typical episode, I think.
Yeah. Creeping up on 100 episodes.
Yeah. Dang. That's crazy.
If you don't count Minute Microscopy.
Yeah, that'll double the number.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Well, if you have any creepy stories ranging from people setting on fire randomly all the way to patents, yeah, leave them in the comments. Spook us all out. Deep sea dive into Halloween story.
Yeah. Any stories like Bigfoot or aliens or werewolves or crazy things that you've seen. Like I'm genuinely like really interested in those kinds of things. Like
Or if you've eaten at the chupacabra.
Yeah. First-hand accounts of things that you've seen. I've got plenty of stories, but we'll save that for later. But if you have stories, leave them in the comments. Tell us those stories. Tell everybody the stories. It's not just us. But I'll be reading.
Tell the world.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me here on Kitchen Sink Microscopy.
Oh, yeah. And look up Alashenka if you want a little bit of a creep out.
How do you spell that?
It's Aleshenka. Well, that's in English. In Russian, it's going to be different.
Right.
This is Russian. My Russian's a little rusty, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to attempt that.
Yeah, I only remember a couple words. Granted, I didn't take classes of it.
I took 3 years of Russian, and all I know is "Я люблю пить кровь." I like to drink blood.